They told me I didn't belong within sight of the palace. The king himself told me to disappear, and the night my stepmother shoved me into the cold, like a stray, and barred the door. I almost believed her. But that was the night the gods started writing a different ending. If it were you, what would you have done? Begged to be let back in, run for the bush knock, till your knuckles bled, and your pride went with it. My name is Chidima. The girl people looked through the one up before dawn, when the ground still holds the night, sweeping a packed dirt floor that never really gets clean. Nudging coals awake with a breath, and two careful sticks balancing water on my head, till the rim leaves a small moon on my skull. The hut smelled like yam and wood smoke, and damp earth like boiled silence, and every morning I gave myself the same talk. Be small, be quiet, be useful, survive. You know what I mean. My shoulders only dropped in the forest. The path knew. My bare feet, the dew bit my ankles. The air tasted like green leaves and wet bark, and the trees stood still like patient old people who didn't need to shout. After a storm, a branch had fallen too big to drag, so I braced my whole weight and worked it down to pieces, rope between my hands, breath like fire in my chest, telling myself I was strong enough because who else would carry that weight for me? Good day, beautiful one, a voice said behind me, and I jumped so hard the rope fell. The words in my mouth crashed into each other. I turned, and there he was, not from my world. By the look of him, fabric so fine it pulled light out of the shade, a friend behind him at a distance like a respectful shadow. My knees went soft because I knew that face from the square. The prince, the man we never said out loud, only nodded toward. I dropped fast, forehead to dirt, words sorry, and my prince tumbling, and he said, "Please rise, how are you going to carry that you'll hurt your back?" Nobody had ever asked me how my back felt. If it were you, would you let him help? Or say I can manage because that's the line that keeps you safe? I whispered I would manage because that's what I'd been taught. And he smiled, warm not mocking, nodded to his friend. And they lifted the bundle like it was a story they already knew how to carry, set it up, walked beside me toward the village like we were equals on a road that didn't belong to anyone. My heart thumped like it wanted out. Heat climbed my face and something loosened in me I didn't have a word for. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like fog. I felt seen. Pattern interrupt. The kindness didn't walk through my doorway with me. When I pushed the cloth aside at dusk, two pairs of eyes cut across the room. "Where have you been?" my stepmother snapped like she'd caught me stealing daylight. "You left at first light, and now the moon is coming. Do you think this is a hotel?" Ada's father, quiet as a shadow most days, tried to say, "She brought a big bundle, the work is done," but anger didn't need truth. It needed a target. "Go to the kitchen, and don't expect dinner," she said, and the word dinner sounded like a thing rich people say to hear their tongues shine. I nodded, swallowed, made myself small. This rhythm lived in my bones. At the market a day later, Ada put on her sweet voice and asked me to go help a friend crack kernels, same trick as last time. The time that earned me an hour of shouting and a new name for lazy. My stomach knotted, my mouth went dry, then a word came out so small it surprised me. No, not after last time. I walked away while her mouth made a perfect little O, and that night over the cooking fire I held that tiny word like an egg and dared to think it might hatch. I didn't expect to see him again so soon. Bright noon near the palace road, heat bouncing off stones, Ada dressed like a peacock that believed its own mirror, the prince smiling, the polite smile people expect from a man with guards. His eyes slid past the beads and found me on the other path, water pot on my head, spine straight like a prayer. "Greetings, beautiful maiden," he called, voice easy, not playing, and I stared at the dust and murmured back because Ada burned holes even when she pretended to be kind. She leaned toward him. Some girls don't know how to answer a prince, and he said, she seems shy, that's all the corners of his eyes soft, and I had to look away before hope made me reckless. At the stream he found me again, quiet water running over stones, shade heavy enough to cool your thoughts. I bowed, he said, please don't, and asked my name like it mattered what a nobody called herself. Chidima, I said, and he said it back like a song asked who my father was, and the sky pressed lower, because there was no father to point at, only absence that knew my shape. I'm alone, I said, my parents are gone, and he didn't rush to fill the silence with a sorry that would have bounced off the water. He just stood with me while the stream talked, and I breathed again without noticing. He saw the outline of my grief and didn't look away. Do you think that's fair, that some people get seen and others get measured like chores? Or do we make fairness by the way we hold each other's stories? Under the mango tree pounding yam, the way my arms know better than my mouth. I sang my mother's song without meaning to. The one about the river bird that wants wings, not because it hates the river, but because too much stillness can choke a throat. I didn't know I'd been singing out loud until his shadow fell on the ground, and he said, that song carries a whole life, what does it mean? I almost dropped the pestle, told him, it's nothing. And he shook his head gently, like truth deserved a seat, and somehow my mouth opened and the words came. I told him about being a stranger in my own house, about hunger that turns you into a thief of soup, about dreaming of flying, not away from duty, but toward breath. He listened, really listened, and didn't go looking for his reflection in my tears. Pattern interrupt. Hunger will make you break your own rules. And that night, a pot of fish soup sat on the hearth. Rich smell climbing into my brain like a thief, and my stepmother slid a single piece of yam onto my plate like it was a jewel. My stomach answered loud enough to shame a drum circle. I told myself, be small, be quiet, be strong, and my hand lifted the lid anyway. Steam hit my face, and I took a little, just enough to remember I was human. Morning tore the house open. Who touched my soup? She howled. The room shrank, I said. Me, I was hungry, and the word hungry sounded like a confession of murder. Are you a thief now? She spit, useless, and now a thief. Her hand grabbed the stirring stick and lifted Ada's father, caught her arm and said, enough, just a little soup, and for a second I believed daylight could live in this house. Then the stick dropped, and her eyes promised later. Later came fast. Ada saw me talking with the prince under the mango tree. Jealousy bubbled like old oil. She called me witch and snake. Mama liked how those words felt in her mouth. They cornered me, hands and insults together. And when it stopped, I tasted iron and lay on the dirt, trying not to breathe too big. Morning found me at the stream, because water does not ask for explanations. He found me, saw the bruises, and his face went hard, in a way I hadn't seen, voice low. Who did this? I told him, and he didn't make speeches about justice or thunder. He just reached out and wiped one tear with his thumb like he had the right. Please don't see me again, I whispered. They'll beat me worse, and he said, what if I told you you are more than a friend to me? What if I told you I love you? Yeah, that happened. The world tilted and then clicked into place like it had been a little crooked for a long time, and I just hadn't noticed. We didn't have time to build a quiet little world around that sentence. The king sent for him, the throne room swallowed air, and when he came out, his jaw was set like a gate. He told me what the king said. You will marry Ada. Her family is important. The kingdom needs it. Your private feelings will wait their turn or fall silent. And then he reached for my hand and said, "Come with me." I tried to pull back because fear knows the size of crowns. He squeezed once and said, "He needs to see the girl I love," and walked me into the palace like my bare feet belonged on the cool stone. The king's face darkened like a storm at sea. His voice cut with old iron. "Get out, child. Leave this place and count yourself lucky if your head stays where it belongs." And I ran because fear has long legs and mine are trained. Here's the twist. The king sits on a throne, but some vows are older than any throne. He found me again at the edge of the forest and said, "There is a place where truth has rules, even kings obey." We went deep where the air went still, and the trees leaned into a ring of stones wearing moss like memory. And in that circle he took both my hands and spoke slow and steady. "Before the gods who see what men hide, I take you. Chidima, as my wife, I will protect you, love you, walk with you all my days." My throat closed and opened like a door fighting rust, and I said the same back voice, shaking but clear. No parade, no drums, no beads clicking, just the trees watching and the stones listening. If you think that doesn't count, ask yourself who taught you which promises are real, a crowd or your own bones. Ada's introduction ceremony to the prince didn't happen. Could not happen now, but nobody told my stepmother the whole truth yet, so. She cooked like a woman trying to impress a title, rubbed oil into Ada's skin till she glowed. Friends crowded the doorway with gossip and guesses. 2 royal guards came. Asked for Ada's father. He went to the palace, came back looking older, said. The ceremony is off, and the elder Ezimuo arrived right behind him, with a calm that cut through noise. "The gods are wise," he said. "Do not invite death by forcing what the gods have refused." The words rippled through the village like wind in dry grass, and by the time I stepped into the yard that evening, the house had turned to a weapon again. "Sleep outside," my stepmother said, "and tomorrow you tell me where you were, or I will strangle you myself." I curled under a sky that felt too big and sang my mother's song to keep my ribs from shaking. In the morning, the plan hardened a man from a neighboring village. A quick wedding to bury the shame the prince sent away on royal business by a father who knew how to move pieces across a board without making noise. I ran to the shrine because the stones had listened once, and maybe they would again, pressed my forehead to cold rock, and told the gods I would rather stop breathing before them than drag a stranger to an altar, while my real vows beat like a drum inside my chest. The elder stepped out of the shade like he'd been waiting for my steps. Listened to the whole story, then reached into his bag and pulled a small vial that caught the light. "Drink this at midday," he said, "and your sleep will be so deep they will think you have left this world. Fear will drive them to me for help, and I will send word to the prince." "What if they bury me?" I asked, "because fear earns its questions. Then you will die after sunset," he said, voice steady, "but the gods are with you, I have seen it." Risky. Yes. The only door I could see that didn't lead to a life that wasn't mine. Also yes. Stick around because what happened next will blow your mind. Midday came both slow and fast. My hands shook while the vial touched my lip. I whispered a prayer in my mother's voice and drank it. Tasted like water, like nothing. And then drowsiness rolled in from my toes, warm and heavy, and the edges of the room blurred. Ada's voice came from far away. "Chidima, they're here, wake up," then louder, then panic. Then my stepmother's steps, hands on my shoulders, cold fingers searching for breath. Then 3 words like a stone breaking a bowl. "She's dead." The hut filled with noise, fear rising like floodwater. My stepmother saying, "You don't take a dead girl to the elder," Ada's father saying, "We must." And then the doorway filled with someone else and the air changed. The prince. He had ridden back like the earth was on fire behind him, dust in his lashes, eyes only for me. And when he saw me lying there, he made a sound I had never heard from him, grief without armor, no title, just a boy with love burning his throat. He knelt, gathered me in his arms, said no like he could wrap the word around time and pull it backward. The king followed power set aside by something heavier. Son, do not do. This you are the prince, he said softly. And my prince didn't even hear him. What he loved was on the floor in his hands. The elder walked past all that noise the way water slips between stones. Put a cool hand on my forehead, began to chant low and old, and the room got quiet. Breath returned like a wave turning my eyelids fluttered. Light pushed in, and the first thing I saw was his face wet and open, and I whispered, "My prince, am I dreaming?" "No," he said, pulling me close, "you are here, you are safe. It is a strange thing to be born twice in one life, but that is what it felt like." Pattern interrupt. Guilt can turn a hard heart soft in a single breath. My stepmother fell to her knees so fast, the floor thumped. Words tumbled out, raw and ugly and true. Where do I begin? Jealousy poisoned me. I hurt you. I tried to break you. Forgive me if you can, my daughter, please. Ada stood tight and shaking. Then she folded, tears streaming. I was cruel. I thought making you smaller would make me bigger. I was wrong. I am sorry. If it were you, would you forgive them? Or let their apologies crash to the floor and finally feel how power feels in your hand? I looked at the woman who fed me crumbs and threats, and to my own surprise, what rose up was not triumph, not even anger, but a deep, tired pity and a relief like rain at the end of a dry season. Yesterday is already in the ground. I said we can stop watering it. Let's face forward, I forgive you. I turned to Ada, took her hands, said, "You are my only sister. If I don't forgive you, then who will?" And she collapsed against me like a child, and I held her with the strength I hadn't known I was building. The king took his son outside where the air moved easier, and sometimes you learn that kings don't always shout. Sometimes they sigh. He told the prince that he taught him those customs with his own mouth, that vows made before the gods outrank a father's plan, that he had tried to bend a future and found it was already set by hands older than his. He told him to prepare that when the business was done, we would marry with all the proper rights, not because the king lost, but because the king remembered who he was under the crown. Do you think that's weakness or wisdom that knows when to bow? The wedding was not a fairy tale painted by strangers. It was a village exhale. It was drums and feet and dust and laughter. It was wrappers that moved like water and food that did not run out before my plate. It was the elder's voice threading through the air like smoke. It was my hand in the prince's hand, while the king's eyes rested on us as if listening had become his new strength. My stepmother stood near the front, not hiding Ada beside her, with a face unknotted, Ada's father finally taller than his silence. I looked at my husband, and then at the people who had watched me vanish and return, and I felt the bird in my mother's song finally lift, circle, fly. But I will not tie a ribbon where life doesn't, because you came here for truth, not a postcard. Forgiveness is not a spell. It does not erase what happened. It just stops it from writing your next chapter without asking permission. Tradition can hold you like a house and trap you like a cage. We used both in this story. A king bent, and it saved us. A mother changed because guilt bit hard enough, and somewhere there is a girl who drank nothing that day and was buried without the elder's hand to pull her back. That's real, too. So tell me honestly, if it were you, would you have taken the vial or walked into that forced wedding and set the world on fire in front of everyone? Would you have forgiven a woman who called you witch and starved you till your bones learned to whisper? Would you have let your sister cry on your shoulder, or asked her to sleep one night on the cold ground and call it even? Do you think what the king did was fair? Was it strategy or surrender? And what kind of apology would you have asked for if a lifetime of small hurts finally turned into a single large one? I know what I chose and I can live with it, but I want to hear your truth. If you made it here, thank you for staying in the room with me, for letting a girl from a small village tell you how she became a wife in a sacred circle older than any palace. How she fell asleep at noon and woke to a prince's tears. How she learned that being seen is the first step and being brave is the second. And how mercy, when it's real, tastes like water after a hard run. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. Tell me what part made you angry, what part made you breathe easier, what part you would have done different. Argue with me if you need to. I can take it. It's how we stay honest. Stick around if you want more stories like this, messy and bright and human. Hit subscribe so it finds you. Share this with someone who needs to remember their story isn't over until they say it is, and tell me. In your life, what would you choose, duty or love, pride or peace, silence, or the kind of truth that finally sets a person free?